I speak to you in the name of one God, holy and undivided Trinity. I am not a big fan of shorter days and longer nights. The end of daylight savings time is always a downer for me. It's not that I'm afraid of the dark or even dislike it per se. There is something comforting, womb-ish about darkness. It's just that I don't like so much of it. And yet, annoyingly, what I like and dislike does not seem to be the controlling factor in creation. So here we are. In the ancient world, in early Christian speech and writings, light and darkness were used as metaphors for the power of good and the power of evil. The people Israel are referred to as those who bear light for the world, and Jesus himself is described as the light of the world. In the gospel passage we just heard, though, Jesus speaks of a time of sheer darkness, a time when even the moon will not give off its light and the stars will be shaken. John's gospel in particular paints a very sharp divide between darkness and light. You are either a child of the darkness or a child of the light. There is no gray. Now, normally, I am not a big fan of this either-or thinking because to my eyes and my experience, much of life is gray. But right now, this dark light imagery feels like a fitting metaphor for how many of us view our current national and global life. It feels to some of us as if we are in a prolonged night, a time like the one Jesus speaks of, when the forces of darkness are evident everywhere and seem to be getting stronger. Since last year, with food prices increasing and emergency COVID benefits expiring, the number of hungry people in this country has increased dramatically, with 44.2 million people now in families that had difficulty getting food enough to feed them, including 13.5 million children. This is an increase of 11 million people over the previous year. And as is so often the case, hunger disproportionately affects families of color, which experienced hunger at twice the rate of white families. Here in Kent County, 10% of us live below the federal poverty level, and 72% of the children in our schools are eligible for free meals, meaning for most, it is the only meal they can rely on that day. Here in the wealthiest nation in the world, just up the street, people are hungry. People are living in grim conditions, dirt floors in their homes, no running water. Across our nation, about 500,000 people live on the streets, 116 of them right here in the Midshore region. And in Kent County, we do not have a shelter, just a group of churches providing a place for folks to sleep from January to March. Now, thank God they do, but people have nowhere to sleep, nowhere to shelter for all 12 months of the year. Jeff and I get multiple calls per week in the church office or on the emergency call line from desperate people looking for money to help them stay a couple more nights in the Driftwood Inn, or if there's somewhere I know they can get food or somewhere to stay the night. All of this is tremendously distressing, and frankly, at times I just want to run away. It would be easy right now in this time of darkness to despair and believe that the light will never again seep into the room, our lives, or the world. And in the midst of this darkness, this frustration, this despair, Advent begins, a season of patient, hopeful waiting, a season in which we take time to examine our hearts, our lives, to prepare for the birth of the Christ within us, and to discern how we are called to be Christ's hands and heart, Christ's light for this world. And even in our darkened world, if we take time to sit and listen carefully, we hear the echo of a song. It is actually a song that has been going on from the very beginning, but one to which we may not have paid attention. It is a quiet song, not one that bullies us into listening, but it is persistent. A song sung by a young woman who was among the poorest and most vulnerable people of her day with nowhere to shelter. It is a song of a world turned upside down, a world in which the injustice we create is turned on its head. It's the song of a world in which the hungry are fed, the proud scattered, and the humble uplifted. A song that sees the world not as it is, but as God dreams it to be. Sung by a young woman who was willing to cooperate with God, to put her own body, her own life on the line to advance God's vision. It is a song of hope, hope in God. Now, hope is a word that gets thrown around an awful lot. And what the world usually means by the word is the jingoistic cross your fingers, squeeze your eyes shut, and really hope that everything works out. That is not what Christian hope is all about. Christian hope is the hope of Mary's song, the hope of light, even in the middle of darkness, the quiet confidence that light always does begin to break in again. It is a song that sees the world exactly as it is, with all its pain and suffering and darkness, but knows a greater truth, the truth of how God sees the world. It is the song of a people who are willing to put their own lives and bodies on the line to be part of bringing God's vision to reality, to embody this hope in their lives. Christian hope is not pie in the sky, reality-denying hope. It is knowing deep in our bones that evidence often to the contrary, God is working in the world, and God's dream for the world will be fulfilled at some point in time. We may not see any evidence of it right now, but we hope, because we know that God is with us, in us, and desires to work through us. We know that the world, darkness, does not have the last word. We know that light always begins to seep into the cracks. In these ever-lengthening nights, in this time of darkness, the world desperately needs us, the people of God, to keep our hearts tuned to this song. And we need to know deep in our beings that Mary's song is still ours. Her hope is ours. This can be hard to do, and yet this is our call. This is why we are here, individually and as a community. This is why we come together week in and week out to support each other, to remind ourselves and each other of the truth that the world is not ours, but God's. The truth that injustice, pain, and brokenness are a part of this world. Good Friday happens, but also of the larger truth that Easter always comes. The world needs you and me to do what Jesus told his disciples to do: keep awake. Keep our ears tuned to Mary's song, to God's love song, and keep our eyes focused wherever the light breaks in. The world needs places like Emmanuel, places where we encourage each other to do this hard work, where we hear the stories that give us the strength and the courage to go on, where we take time to let the great story of God settle into our hearts, into our beings, where we take the time to let God penetrate the shells we build around ourselves, penetrate our darkness, and then light us on fire with God's hope and love, and send us out in the world to bring that light to others. The world needs places that are learning labs of love, compassion, and justice. My prayer this Advent is that we, like Mary, like Jesus, never make peace with injustice, never make peace with our death-dealing culture, that we keep alert, watch for the light, and then let it fill us up and drive us out to bear that light to a broken, hurt, and darkened world. May it be so.